Hello everyone. How can we find the maximum among these three numbers? Let's understand the logic behind how to find the maximum among three numbers. Here is a condition, that is number 1 is greater than number 2. By this condition, we can find which number is greater. If this condition is true, we are going to get the result, that is number 1 is greater than number 2. And if this condition is false, we are going to get the result, that is number 2 is greater than number 1. Now we'll see what are the conditions we are going to apply when number 1 is greater than number 2. This condition is true. When this condition is true, we are going to get the result number 1 is greater than number 2. Now we are going to check another condition, that number 1 should be greater than number 3. Then only number 1 is greater. Otherwise number 3 will be greater. So this all operations are performed only when number 1 is greater than number 2. If this condition is false, then we are going to get the result as number 2 is greater than number 1. So we already got to know that number 1 is smaller than number 2. So we need to check whether this number 2 is greater than number 3 also. So we are going to check the condition number 2 is greater than number 3. If this condition is true, then we are going to get the maximum as number 2. That is number 2 will be greater than number 1 and also number 3. So finally we are going to get as number 2 is greater. But if the second condition is false, then we are going to get a result as maximum number is number 3 and finally we're going to get number 3 as maximum. So in this way the logic behind finding the maximum of three numbers. So let's write the code for the given. So let's start with writing a comment, that is max of three numbers, and start the code with hash include stdio.h, and we'll move into the main program, that is int main, and we are going to open the parenthesis and start writing our code. We are going to take a data type int and take variables number 1 comma number 2 comma number 3 and it's a maximum variable. We are going to store the maximum value in this variable max. So here we are going to write a command to print prompt to the user that we need to enter the values of number 1, number 2 and number 3. So printf, make sure that you write the first letter of the prompt with caps. So enter the values of number 1 comma number 2 and number 3 comma max. So colon and then semicolon. And next scan the elements, scan the numbers, that is %d. We are going to specify the format specifiers %d, %d and %d comma. We need to store the first number in address number 1 comma second number in address 2 and third number in address 3, and then we are going to end the statement. Now we are going to enter into the nested if else statements. Here we'll write first if condition, that if number 1 is greater than number 2. Then we are going to write another nested if else, that is if number 1 is also greater than number 3. Sorry, there is a mistake. I think that it is not number 3, it is number 2. So here number 1 is greater than number 3. Then we are going to open the parenthesis, and if number 1 is greater than number 2 and number 1 is also greater than number 3, then what is the maximum number? Yes, number 1. So we are going to store this number 1 in maximum variable, and if this condition is true, then we are going to print that maximum number would be number 3. Then we are going to come out of if condition. This code, the nested code, will be executed only if the condition is true. That is, if number 1 is greater than number 2, the nested if else condition will be executed. And now we are going to write the code for else. That if the condition is false, then we are going to write else condition. That is, else if number 2 is greater than number 3, then we have to assign number 2 value as maximum. And otherwise, if the condition is false, then we are going to enter maximum is equal to number 3. So we have completed our code. We need to print the maximum number now. So we need to printf maximum of 3 numbers would be comma max semicolon and return 0. Then we need to run the code. Let's see the output. Oh, there is a warning here. Oh, we did not mention the format specifier in printf. There is a syntax error. So let's specify format specifier. Okay, we'll stop the compiling and we'll edit it %d as it is an integer. So now let's run the code. Yeah, it's working. So let's take the variable size 567 and maximum of the number is 7. Here, if condition is true, then only we are going to execute the inner nested if condition. If that condition is false, then we are going to execute the else condition. The code seems lengthy and it is so confusing. So let's use both relational operators and logical operators to make this code simple. So how can we use both in a single statement? See, if number 1 has to be greater or maximum among the 3, then the condition is it should be greater than both number 2 and number 3. The same applies to number 2. If that has to be maximum, then it should be greater than both number 1 and number 3. And if number 3 has to be greater, then it should be greater than both number 1 and number 2. Let's start the code so that you will understand in a simple and easy way. So let's remove this if else nested statements. So because it's too complex to remember and too complex to execute even. So let's use logical and relational operators. Here we have already a condition, that is number 1 is greater than number 2. So logical AND is used between two conditions, so that if condition 1 is true and condition 2 is false, then the result would be false. So for logical AND, we are going to say the definition as when both the conditions are true, then only we are going to get the final result as true. If any one of the condition is false, then we are going to get the final result as false. So for that purpose, we are going to use if plus relational operators and logical operators, so that it will be much more simple. Here we are going to combine number 1 is greater than number 2 and number 1 is greater than number 3. We have used a logical operator in between. If this condition is true, then what is the result? The result is maximum number would be number 1. Otherwise, we are going to check another condition. That is, if the above condition is false, we are going to check another condition, that is number 2 is greater than number 3. If this condition is true, then we are going to assign number 2 as maximum number. And finally, we are going to check if the above two conditions are false, then it is going to print, else maximum number would be number 3. So finally, we are going to print the maximum number. Printf, open the parenthesis, maximum number, make the first letter as capital, give a semicolon, and then %, format specifier, then with comma variable, then semicolon, return 0, semicolon, run the code. So here we are going to understand it much more clearly that if number 1 is greater than number 2, and if it is greater than number 3 also, then maximum number would be number 1. So here is a mistake, I think, like we don't have to give in the prompt like maximum number. We'll remove it. Now let's run the code. Yeah, it's fine. Now enter the numbers. Let's enter 2, then 4 and 5. It has given us maximum number is 5. So in this video we have seen, so that is by using if else statements, relational operators and logical operators. Thank you.